Hello everybody, Harry from GMAT Ninja here, and welcome back to our series on critical reasoning for the GMAT and the executive assessment. Now, in this series, we've been talking about the various ways we've seen some of our students make mistakes and how we can go about avoiding those mistakes in the first place. And so in today's episode, I want to talk to you about rejecting imperfect answer choices. Now, what I mean by that is in the situation where you're going through a critical reasoning question and you've crossed 4 of the answer choices out, but you go and take a look at that one that's left and you don't like it. Now, there might be a couple of reasons for this. Maybe you think it's irrelevant. Maybe it doesn't quite do what you want it to do. Maybe it's not strong enough. But for a variety of reasons, you've crossed 4 answer choices out for a very good reason. So the one you've got left must be the answer, but you don't want to choose it. And maybe you go cross it out, and maybe that means you get the question wrong, or maybe it means that you end up going through all the other answer choices again, and we just burn through a chunk of time until you actually have to end up choosing this one that you didn't like in the first place. All right, so today I want to take a look at how that happens, where it happens, and what we can do to avoid it. Now, there's 2 main causes that we see of this happening, rejecting imperfect answer choices. And the first one, I'm not going to spend too much time on it here because we're going to build through this as we go through the questions in this video. And that's really reacting to answer choices, not thinking about them. So again, imagine that you're in a critical reasoning question, you look at an answer choice and you just go, no. Talking about a completely different thing, maybe uses different words to those in the passage, maybe talking about a different topic, and you just react to it. You don't really think about the implications of it, and you just cross it out straight away, move on to the next one. Then maybe you get the question wrong, you go back and review this question, you find actually that answer choice that you thought had nothing to do with the question is actually the correct answer. And if you had thought about it rather than just reacted to it, maybe you wouldn't have crossed it out. So like I said, we're going to take a look at how that happens in the questions that we're going to deal with later in this video. The second way that we really see people rejecting imperfect answer choices is when in their head, they're answering a slightly different question to the one that's been written. And I've got the 3 most obvious ways this happens written down here. So if a question asks you, which of the following, if true, most weakens an argument, that doesn't mean you have to destroy the argument entirely. It just means you have to weaken it a little bit. And even if it's just a little bit, that might be the correct answer. So if you're in a weakened question and you find an answer choice that weakens the argument but doesn't destroy it, well, then maybe hold on to it because that could be the right answer. It doesn't do quite what you want it to do, but maybe it's answering the question that was written and not the one that's in your head. And then we've got these 2 other examples where you're doing exactly the same sort of thing. If the question asks you to strengthen the argument, it doesn't want you to prove it. It just wants you to strengthen it, and maybe 1 step's enough. And similarly, if you've got a paradox passage and the question is which of the following, if true, most helps to resolve the paradox, well, that doesn't mean you have to completely resolve it. It just means you need to take perhaps 1 step towards resolving it. So this has been dealt with in other videos, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that today. But the one thing we can say is that if you're doing critical reasoning question, make sure you really read every word in the question carefully. Please don't just put them into buckets and say, well, it says weaken in the question, must be a weakened question. Really consider what the question's asking you to do so that we can make sure you're answering the question that's been asked and not the one you might want to ask. Like I said, we're going to spend a few questions today talking about what happens when you react and don't think about answer choices. So I've got 3 questions lined up for you. The first one is going to have 2 answer choices. It's a nice quick one. And then we'll go through 2 full GMAT questions to finish up today and to look at this process in action. So I'm going to get the first question up on the screen for you now. If we're talking about not reacting to answer choices, please take a look at that here. Have a think about both of them and have a think about how both of these answer choices could answer the question. I'll give you about 90 seconds to take a look at this one, and then I'll see you on the other side so we can go through it together. Okay, as always, if you need a little more time to take a look at this question, now's your chance to pause the video, but we're going to take a closer look at this one together, and we'll be right back here once you finish working on it. All right, so in this question, we're given a situation that some psychologists try to explain. And that situation is that when you've got people in a restaurant and they're paying their bill in cash, if the bill is presented on a tray that has a credit card logo on the tray, then those people paying their bills in cash will tip more than if the bill was presented on a tray that did not have a credit card logo on it. And we've got some psychologists and they're trying to interpret this situation. And they're saying that seeing this credit card logo makes the credit card holders willing to spend more because seeing the logo reminds them that their spending power exceeds the cash they have immediately available. So seeing the logo reminds them that they have this credit card in their pocket, which means that they could tip more. They have more spending power available. They have this credit card, it has a limit, and they could use the credit card. They're still paying the bill in cash, but they're willing to tip a bit more because I've got this magic card in my pocket that essentially gives me access to more money. And so the question asks us, which of the following, if true, most strongly supports this psychologist's interpretation of the studies? Okay, we want to support this interpretation. Let's jump right in and take a look at A. And A tells us that patrons who are under financial pressure from their credit card obligations tend to tip less when presented with a restaurant bill on a tray with a credit card logo than when the tray has no logo. Now, this is what I mean earlier by saying let's not react to it. Let's think about this one. Lots of people, when they look at this answer choice, they see tend to tip less. They say, well, the situation was about tend to tip more, tip less, tip more, can't have anything to do with it, get rid of A. Now we can go on to the other answer choices. But rather than reacting to it, let's have a think about what this is telling us. The explanation that we were given was seeing this logo reminds people about their credit cards, reminds them that they have this card in their pocket that gives them access to more spending power. Now, in particular, it says many credit card holders, does not say all of them. So it leaves us a little bit of leeway that A comes along and says patrons who are under financial pressure from their credit card obligations, so people who have spent a bit, maybe spent a bit too much money over the last few months, and now their bills are really high, they're struggling to pay it off a bit. These people tend to tip less when presented with the restaurant bill on a tray with a credit card logo than when the tray has no logo. So again, I'm putting a bill in front of a person, it has a credit card logo on it, and this logo reminds that person that they have this little card. Now, for many of the credit card holders who are maybe not under financial pressure, that reminds them they've got the ability to spend more, so they tip more. Whereas A talks about people who actually, they've got high bills already, they're under financial pressure from their credit card obligations. So when this tray comes along with the credit card logo on them, it reminds them about the credit card, potentially reminds them about the pressure they're under, and so they tip less because maybe they need this money to spend on their credit card bills. And so A supports the psychologist's interpretation that seeing this logo reminds people about their credit cards, and either they've got more spending money, as the passage talked about, or as A talks about, they're under a bit of pressure and maybe they need to save a bit of money to pay their bills off. So as I said, A talks about tipping less, the passage talks about tipping more, but A does support what the psychologists are saying. So let's leave A and we can take a look at B. Now, yeah, B comes along and says the percentage of restaurant bills paid with a given brand of credit card increases when that credit card's logo is displayed on the tray with which the bill is prepared. Now, being very careful here, the passage only talks about people who pay their bills in cash. It's in the top line in the passage there. You can go back and take another read of it. And so this study is only about the amount people tip when they're paying in cash and whether the tray the bill is presented on either has a logo of a credit card or doesn't. So B, first of all, talks about the percentage of bills paid with a given brand of credit card. Well, first of all, we're not that interested in whether a bill's paid with a credit card at all. We're only interested in what happens when it's paid in cash. But secondly, we're not worried about which proportion is paid with an American Express, which with a Visa, which with a MasterCard. It's about the amount of that's being tipped here. So B doesn't have a huge amount to do with what's going on in the passage. It certainly doesn't support the psychologist's interpretation, so we can cross B out. And in this shortened version, A would be our answer. Now, the reason I've included only these two answer choices is, first of all, as we're talking about, people just tend to chuck A out because tipping less, not tipping more, that nothing to do with it. They react, they don't think about the answer choice. But B here, B is the second most popular answer choice. Now, what I think happens is people chuck A out and they have to find one answer choice that they're uncomfortable with, but it does the job in their head at that point. And so what I think happens is people just tend to sort of choose the best of a set of bad options. They've thrown A out, it can't be A because it's talking about tipping less. And so they almost hold their nose and go, well, I've got to pick something. That'll do. It's the best one of the rest. And that's what I mean about this situation where you get very uncomfortable. You've thrown out a good answer already. Let's not react to A. Let's actually think about it and think about how it supports what, or how it could support the psychologist's interpretation. And in this case, A is actually going to be our answer here. All right, so I hope that gives you an indication of what we're looking for in this video. Now we're going to jump up to full questions with 5 answer choices here. So like we've been talking about, have a think about each answer choice. Please don't react to them. Make sure you're giving each answer choice its due. And let's see if we can get through the next question. I'll give you a full 2 minutes for this one, and I'll see you when we're done. All right, once again, if you need a little more time, now's your chance to pause the video. We'll still be here once you've done working with it, and come join us whenever you're ready. All right, so this question, first of all, the passage here. This is not a passage that builds to an argument. It doesn't build to a conclusion or anything. We've just got a series of statements. So we should probably separate those statements out and find out what we're dealing with in this passage, so we can use these points to argue with or against each other. So first of all, we get told that half of this city, half of Metroburg's operating budget comes from this 2% on tax on the salaries paid to anybody that works in the city. Okay, so we get information about the tax regime of the city's government. Then one company is going to relocate outside the city. Great, so they're going to be outside this 2% tax on salaries, which is what we're told in the first sentence. All of the employees, and that's 1% of everybody who works in the city, so all of the employees will now be employed at the new location. So this company is not going to throw anybody out. It's not telling us it's getting rid of anybody. All the company's employees, that 1% of people now employed in Metroburg, will be employed at the new location. So we're just going to take these people, move them outside. We've got our basically three facts that we're going to have to use to argue with or against each other. Now, as I said at the start of the video, one part of what we're doing today is be very careful with what the question asks. And so this one says, from the information given, which of the following can most properly be concluded? And I just want to zoom in on that most properly be concluded for a second. That does not mean that the correct answer is going to be completely and 100% nailed on, definitely based on the information in the passage. It's just saying, based on the information in the passage, which of these 5 is most likely? Which one can I most properly conclude? So again, we're back to that difference between, or it's similar to that difference I said at the start of the video, that strengthen does not mean prove. In this case, which of the following can most properly be concluded? It doesn't have to be 100%. It's going to be the best of these answer choices. So let's take a look at all 5 of them and see which one we can most probably conclude from the information in the passage. All right, so A tells us that unless other employees add a substantial number of jobs in Metroburg, the company's relocation is likely to result in a 1% reduction in the revenue for the city's operating budget. All right, so A, I've got 2 problems with A, first of all. The biggest one is that, okay, this company is 1% of the workers in the city, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are 1% of the revenue from this tax, right? If the people in this company, in this financial services company, if they are paid, let's say, significantly more than average, then the 1% of workers will be likely to contribute more than 1% of the revenue from this tax. If the people in this financial services company are paid significantly less than the average income in this city, then they'll probably pay less than 1% of the revenue from this tax. So straight away, A's looking pretty shaky, but already we were told that half of Metroburg's operating budget came from this tax. So even if we ignore what we've just said about where these people are in relation to the average salary, if the 1% of the workers are actually paying 1% of that tax, well, that's not equivalent to 1% of the operating budget because only half of the budget comes from this tax. So A, there's a couple of problems with A. We can't properly conclude, or most properly conclude, we can't conclude what A says based on the information in the passage. So let's cross A out. All right, B tells us that although the company's relocation will have a negative effect on the city's tax revenue, the company's departure will not lead to any increase in the unemployment rate among the city residents. Okay, first of all, there's no information about any other company here. So realistically, we can say that, well, we don't know. But if you think about what happens when a fairly major company, if it's 1% of all the workers in the city, I don't think I'm going too far by saying it's a fairly major company in the city, if that just disappears and takes all those jobs with it. If you think about all the businesses that support a business like this, if you think about all the coffee shops or the restaurants or the bars that these people might go to, or the people that service the office building, whether they be security personnel or whether they be delivery drivers or maybe the janitorial staff that look after the building, you've got all these jobs that support this company, and we've just taken this company and put it outside the city. So first of all, we don't get any information about any other companies inside the passage. But secondly, if you think about what's likely based on a company relocating, it's possible that this company's departure could lead to a higher unemployment rate within the city. And so we can't say that we could properly conclude B, so let's cross B out. All right, C tells us that one of the benefits that the company will realize from its relocation is a reduction in the taxes paid by itself and its employees. Okay, we know that by moving out of the city, they're going to get away from this 2% of tax on salaries, but we don't know what sort of tax regime they're moving into. It could be that the tax on salaries is actually higher outside of the city, and maybe they've moved for other reasons. We just don't know. We can't conclude this based on the information in the passage, so let's cross C out. Right, now D tells us that revenue from the payroll tax will decline by 1% if there is no increase in jobs within the city to compensate fully or partially from the company's departure. Now, this is very similar to what we were talking about with A. D is possibly a better answer than A because we don't have to deal with that half the operating budget and that implication. But if you think about the first thing we were talking about in A, I don't know how well the people within this financial services company were paid relative to the average wage. If they were bang on the average wage, then 1% of the workers would probably pay 1% of the revenue. Okay, but we don't know they were paid the average. If they were paid significantly more than average, they're probably contributing significantly more than 1% of the revenue. If they were paid significantly less than the average, they're probably contributing significantly less than 1% of the revenue. So D, again, from the information in the passage, we can't properly conclude D, so let's cross D out. Now, I just want to pause here before we go into E. Because if you think back to what we've done so far, I'm fairly confident in my reasoning. I'm very confident in my reasoning that A, B, C, and D are not the correct answer. So by default, E must be right here. But let's take a closer look at E and what actually happens when people look at this question. So E tells us that the company's relocation will tend to increase the proportion of jobs in Metroburg that are in the public sector unless it results in a contraction of the public sector payroll. So first of all, it's talking about the public sector. Nothing in the passage is talked about the public sector at all. So there's a significant minority of the people who I work with who look at this question and go, well, it's talking about the public sector. I can't conclude anything about the public sector because the passage is only talking about this one company that's in the private sector. Let's get rid of E. It's like, whoa, okay, let's slow down again. Remember that this question was saying which can most properly be concluded. So it doesn't need to be absolutely nailed on, 100% definite. It just needs to sound very likely based on the information in the passage. Okay, so I'm going to take 1% of the jobs within the city based on a private sector firm and move them out to the city. So all those jobs have just gone. If we hold everything else steady, so E says the company's relocation will tend to increase the proportion of jobs in Metroburg. Okay, I know I'm being a bit hand wavy here, but if I keep the other private sector jobs steady, and then E says, unless it results in a contraction of the public sector payroll, so I can hold the number of public sector jobs steady, or I could increase them. Well, if I've just taken away a good chunk of the private sector jobs and the public sector jobs are held relatively steady, then the proportion of jobs that are in the public sector is going to increase. And so while I might not be able to say 100% and definitely that E will happen, based on the information in the passage, it's looking pretty good. And if I think back to how confident I was that the other four were wrong, E's going to be my answer. So I hope that at the very least you are happy with why A, B, C, and D are wrong. And so because I have very confidently crossed out four of them, what's left must be the right answer. All right. Then I hope that you're happy with the description of why E might be right. And I'm not looking to absolutely and completely conclude what E says. It's just most properly concluded out of the available options there. So we're not reacting to E. We're not saying public sector. The passage isn't talking about public sector. Chuck it out. We're also being very careful with the wording of the question. And I'm thinking about the implications of the answer choice. And so if you give yourself the time and space to understand the question, read the answer choices, hopefully you don't fall into the trap that we're seeing in this question of just being like, well, E can't be the answer. And so I'm going to go back to one of those four that I've already thought about, but I was very confident before, but E can't be the answer. And that's the trap we see people falling into in these questions when they're rejecting these. Yeah, they're good, but they're not perfect answers. All right, I've got one more question for you. We're trying to ramp up the difficulty as we go through this video. So this one could be a bit tougher. I'll give you a couple of minutes to take a look at this one, and we'll see you when you're done. All right, for the final time today, if you need a little more time to work on this one, now's your chance to pause it. We'll still be here working through the problem when you get back. All right, so this question, one of the reasons it's so difficult is because there's a lot going on in the passage. So I'm going to spend a bit of time breaking the passage apart because that's going to save us a bit of time once we get into the answer choices. So here we've got an argument from someone who appears to be against the irradiation of food. So yeah, we're told, we're given the background scenario in the beginning. Irradiation of food kills bacteria and thus slows down the spoilage of the food, but it also lowers the nutritional value of many food. Okay, we're given an example. Irradiation destroys a significant percentage of whatever vitamin B1 a food may contain. Fine. So irradiation lowers the nutritional value of food, but then we get the point. The proponents of irradiation point out that irradiation is no worse in this respect than cooking. So the people who are in favor of radiation say that, well, yeah, cooking also lowers the nutritional value of food, so irradiation is not that bad. All right. Now we're given two conclusions here, and I'm taking my time picking these apart because I don't want to confuse them when we get into the answer choices. The first conclusion we get is that the fact that irradiation is no worse than cooking at lowering the nutritional value of food, that's beside the point, since much irradiated food is eaten raw. So because it was eaten raw, the cooking was never going to lower the nutritional value. All that's happened is that the irradiation has been used to lengthen the shelf life, and that has lowered the nutritional value. But if we hadn't irradiated it, whoever was eating the food could have got the full nutritional value from the food. So the fact that the proponents are trying to point out is just beside the point. All right, so there's one conclusion. But let's take that, put that to one side. We need to remember it because I don't want to get that mixed up with what's going on when we deal with the actual question we're answering. But that's not part of the problem we are dealing with. The problem we are dealing with is the second part of the conclusion, that this fact is misleading. And that's what we've got written up here. The bit that we're dealing with is the fact is misleading. The fact itself is that irradiation is no worse than cooking at lowering the nutritional value of food. And what we have to do is fill in this gap after the since. We have to find a reason why, or we have to find some evidence or some backup or something that suggests that this fact is misleading. All right, reason I'm spending so much time here is, as we said earlier, one of the reasons people eliminate imperfect answer choices is they are answering a slightly different question to the one that's been asked. So hopefully by nailing down the problem that we want to find a reason or some evidence or something to back up the idea that this fact is misleading, hopefully by doing that, I'm going to make the question a bit easier and make us a little less likely to slip up and cross out something that actually turns out to be the right answer. All right, so let's jump in. Let's take a look at these answer choices and we'll see where we end up. All right, so A tells us that many of the proponents of irradiation are food distributors who gain from a food's having a longer shelf life. All right, so this tells us about the proponents of irradiation. And it tells us why they might be in favor and gives us the motivation why they might want to support irradiation, but it doesn't give us any information about why this fact is misleading. It doesn't help us back up our claim that the fact is misleading, and so therefore we cross it out. It really doesn't have much to do with what we're looking for in this question. All right, B tells us that it is clear that killing bacteria that may be present on food is not the only effect that irradiation has. Okay, again, this is a nice to know, but this fact, this question is about the reduction in nutritional value when you either irradiate or cook some food, and why it's misleading to say that irradiation is no worse than cooking. The fact that irradiation might have other effects is nice to know, but doesn't help us say why this fact is misleading. And so for a similar reason to A, let's cross B out. Right? Now C, cooking is usually the first step in the final step in preparing food for consumption, whereas irradiation serves to ensure a longer shelf life of perishable foods. It's like, again, I know that I'm beginning to repeat myself here, but sort of that's nice to know, but doesn't tell us why irradiation is no worse than cooking. We know that irradiation might come first. It's going to be on longer shelf life, but it's going to be when this food is being prepared to go into the store. Cooking's the last step. It's the last thing you do before you eat it. So, okay. That doesn't tell us why this fact is misleading. It doesn't give us any reason, doesn't give us any evidence, doesn't give us any backup, so we can cross C out. Right. D tells us certain kinds of cooking are in fact even more destructive of vitamin B1 than carefully controlled irradiation is. That doesn't tell us why the fact is misleading. It actually might support the fact. So it's potentially doing the opposite of what we want it to do. So D, definitely not our answer. And now, again, we're going to pause here, think about the scenario we end up in. A, B, C, and D, I've crossed all 4 out. I'd like to think we've had some very good reasons for crossing them out. We're going to take a look at E in a second because I don't want to skip any steps. I'm going to make sure I haven't misread anything, missed anything. If I have a good reason to cross E out, well, then I've made a mistake and we're in trouble. But at this point, it's looking good that E is going to be the answer. So let's read it, try and be objective. I'm not going to bias myself towards it being the answer. I don't want to like it more than I should like it. But let's take a look at E and see what it says. Now, E tells us for food that is both irradiated and cooked. And I'm going to stop here because this is about as far as lots of students get through this answer choice. They throw their hands up and go, well, we're not talking about food that's both irradiated and cooked. I want to know why irradiation is no worse than cooking. Chuck it out. Like, whoa. Read the whole thing. Don't react to it. Let's have a think about the implications of it. So for food that is both irradiated and cooked, the reduction of vitamin B1 associated with either process individually is compounded. All right. So what that tells us, or what the passage is saying, is that irradiation is no worse than cooking at lowering the nutritional value of food. Okay. Now, if it was true that irradiation would lower the nutritional value somewhat, and then cooking would not lower it any further, then we'd be okay. But E comes along and tells us that if I irradiate some food, I'm going to lower the nutritional value, and then I'm going to cook it, I'm going to lower it even further. Right? I'm still going to get that destruction of the bacteria that we mentioned way back at the start of the passage, because I can do that by cooking or by irradiating the food. Doesn't really matter which one I do, I'm going to kill these bacteria. But if I do both, well, then my nutritional value is going to start out nice and high, and then it's going to drop for the irradiation, and then it's going to drop even further for the cooking. So it doesn't matter that, it would be misleading to say that irradiation is no worse than cooking, because a lot of the time when I'm going to cook the food, the irradiation is going to lower the nutritional value and the cooking is going to lower it even more. So it doesn't matter individually how much or how little, or whether irradiation is worse or better or no worse than or whatever. The fact that I'm doing both these processes means that I'm really lowering the nutritional value of the food. And so he's looking good. Now, just to counter the objection of, well, what if I don't cook the food? Remember that first conclusion. This fact is beside the point, since much irradiated food is eaten raw. So we're putting the raw food to one side. We're just worrying about the cooked food. And E comes along and gives us some evidence for why this fact is misleading, because cooking will compound the lowering the nutritional value of the food that irradiation would start. Right? So A, B, and C I got rid of because they didn't give us anything about why this fact is misleading. D actually said the fact wasn't misleading, so D was doing the complete opposite of what we wanted. And E, while it might not be 100% perfect, no real GMAT answer choice, rare GMAT answer choice where it's totally perfect and does everything that you might want it to do, but E most logically completes this argument and gives us the answer we're looking for. All right, so as we said throughout this video, what we're looking for is to avoid crossing out imperfect but still correct answer choices. Now, the two main reasons we said to do that is, first of all, make sure you're 100% and very clear on what you're aiming to do in the question. Don't confuse a weaken question with a destroy the argument question. There are no destroy the argument questions, but I hope you've seen what we mean throughout this video. And the second bit is, please don't react to an answer choice. Make sure you read it fully. Make sure you think about the implications and don't just react to it, and think about how it could or could not answer the question. Give it its due, and hopefully you'll avoid crossing out these imperfect answer choices in the work you do. All right, that's all I've got for you today. I hope this video has been helpful, and we look forward to seeing you back here on another one of our GMAT Ninja videos soon. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.